Hello and welcome, everybody. This is Enrico E. Manalo here once again with another episode of DEI Is. Today with me, I've got Kristina Smith. To introduce her a little bit, over the course of her career, Kristina Smith has amassed a wealth of insight and experience, which she brings to bear as president and executive leader of D&I Strategists. Kristina has worked with government agencies, for-profit, and nonprofit organizations ranging in scale from the local to the national. She is certified in Conversational Intelligence, that's CIQ, as a facilitator of culture as well as diversity and belonging. And she is also DISC certified. Kristina is also an alumnus of both Johns Hopkins University and Emerson College, which is also my undergraduate alma mater. Kristina, how are you?
I am doing great, Enrico. I'm really excited about being here. How are you?
I'm doing great, and I'm so pleased. But you're already getting some love in the comments. So Carolyn says, "Hi, Kristina Smith. Can't wait to
Yeah,
hear
hi,
your insights."
Carolyn. Oh,
We've
great.
also got Cicely or Cecily. I'm not sure how to say that exactly, but
Cicely,
super
Cicely.
excited. And yeah, we got somebody else, Michelle Dotson, as well. So wow, a very warm reception right out of the gate. How are you doing today in general?
I actually feel torn. I am so saddened by the things that are happening in our country today. It can be really overwhelming at times. And at the same time, I just feel like things are bubbling to the surface that we need to address and deal with. And so we have to not wait. I have to remain optimistic. I have to figure out where can I plug in and make a difference. So that's where I try to keep my energy is on what can I do today? Who can I serve today? And
Mhm.
that seems to serve me well.
Yeah, so what I'm hearing you say is not an unreasoning or naive kind of optimism at all, like a very
Right.
grounded in reality and very much grounded in what we can actually have a direct impact ourselves today. Is that right?
Absolutely. Because sometimes people become sort of so overwhelmed that it's hard to function, and I just believe we don't have time for that. Yes, I mourn with everyone else at the tragedies that are happening, and then I redirect my focus to what do I need to do.
Yeah, and thank you so much for bringing this to the surface because it is both very timely and very deeply intertwined with what you and I both do professionally. I think what I would
Absolutely.
like to invite people to consider is we cannot legislate through protest, right? So showing up is great, but there's a real difference to showing up one time to an event and showing up every day to do just a little bit, right? And if we all
Yeah,
do that, you'll be shocked at how much progress we can make, right?
absolutely.
I think one of the lessons that I pull from my friends in unions is organize, organize, organize. And if you don't know exactly
Hmm.
how to do that, then perhaps we can kind of break some of that off for people who are not always in that space in our conversation today. And
Absolutely. One of the things I want to say, Enrico, is the idea that um, of course, post George Floyd, so many companies have been opening up and asking the question, what do we do? How do we do this work? And I actually think that at work, it's a great place to do this work, this diversity work, this understanding differences, because at work, for some companies, for a lot of places, it is more diverse than saying being in your community,
mm,
your church, your neighborhood. Being at work has a great possibility.
yeah, absolutely. And that's really where my thinking is as well. Like there are a few spaces where people, I wouldn't say force, but where they are required to interact with people who are different from them. To get a lot of our
Mhm.
work done, we necessarily have to convene a diversity of skills, backgrounds, and thinking. And that extends to our demographic diversity and identity based, differences as well.
Absolutely.
Okay, so to kind of jump into things and set the scene a little bit, Why are we talking about diversity training fails in 2022? And haven't others already kind of asked this question?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what the challenge is that people have not figured out yet why people do what they do.
Mm,
People have not figured out why people do what they do. Stop and think about it, Enrico. In the weight loss industry, people spend billions of dollars because there's not a really good understanding about what drives people, what motivates people, why people make the decisions that they make. And so part of the challenge with diversity training is people think that if you get trained, that you will change your behavior.
right.
That is not true
No.
because you get information. So basically, it breaks down to there are three areas of the potential for change. One is a training class where you come in and you might learn a definition of unconscious bias or microaggressions, things along that line. But that does not, and 99% of the time, that doesn't change behavior. The second thing is experiential training. So you come in to learn how to do something. So maybe like driver's education when you
Hmm.
get in the car, that's sort of experiential. But the work that diversity professionals in most cases are trying to do is transformational work.
Hmm. Yeah.
And transformational work requires something totally different than just training or even experiential, like having conversations. It really requires some training, some work on yourself. That's where the biggest part of it is.
Hmm.
Some consistency over a length of time and some accountability. And so, either with an accountability partner or coming back together as a group and asking, what have you done? It's like, this is what it requires over time. And so many times, organizations think, we can bring somebody in once a year, have a class, we're good.
Right.
And that's very performative. And so, you're not going to see the change in results unless it's ongoing and deeply rooted.
Yeah, and thank you so much for listing out the ingredients there because I think it's on paper it's easy to see that and say, yeah, okay, but in practice, it's very slippery, right? Because a lot of these things are intangible, right? I don't have a dashboard for how I'm doing internally, right? I have to
Right,
kind of do that inventory myself manually. And, I know that when I jump into my reflective practice, there's often a moment of, wait, how do I even know what I'm feeling? Right. And
right,
then I
right,
kind of realize, no, I know how to do this. I slip deeper into it. But, these days we're very enamored of big data and measurables and things like that. And of course, those do help us to make progress in many areas, but we can't apply that exactly to diversity and personal transformation, right? Because it's going to
right,
look different for everybody in every context. And it's not going to be a consistent advancement of progression. We're going to
correct.
backslide. We're going to have bad
Yep.
days. We're going to have great days. We're
Mhm.
going to have all these many factors, but the point is, like, if we have those accountability structures, then we can kind of get a sense of where we are and how others are doing as well. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. When I was at Hopkins, I took a course in managing change in organizations. And it was so funny because this was a 3 month, no, it was a 9 month long cohort. And we had three instructors. And on the very first day, the very first instructor said, if you want to know how to manage change in organizations, you have to know how to manage change in yourself.
Yeah.
And the instructor said, his name was Charlie Seashore. I just loved, he and his wife taught this class. And they said, we used to call this class change management, but everyone was coming here trying to figure out how to change management. And I raised my hand and said, yes, that's why I'm here. I'm trying to figure out how to change those people. And they said, no, it comes down to you. And every time we had class in Rico, it was hilarious. I would come in and say, well, what if you have a sexist boss? What if you have a racist? Like, can't we get rid of that person? And he would come back every time and say, no, this is about you and your change. I'm telling you, it took me the longest time, but because I kept saying, I'm not the problem. I
Yeah.
am not the
Yeah,
problem.
I mean, that is just so, so human, and I've been there too. I still, under stress, will revert back to that sometimes, but, yeah, I think it's hard to remember in the moment that we cannot change other people, and even if we could, that would be an imposition of our will on another person's way of being. That's
Mhm.
oppression, right? By definition.
Yeah, exactly, exactly, exactly. Yeah, so it's not easy and it's very different than any other kind of work that people go to work to do. This is HEART work. It is hard work and it takes consistency, but it can be done. I'm seeing it done in some organizations really well because the leaders get it and they're really working hard to help create the environment for change.
Definitely. So before we dive into that, I want to ask our audience here. So, lots of companies have diversity efforts these days. And so, what I'd love to hear from our audience is what screams this diversity effort isn't working in an organizational setting. So, if you got something to share, please do share that with us in the comments, and we'll be working that into our conversation a little bit later. But for now, if we're trying to answer the question of why hasn't diversity training worked, where exactly does that conversation begin? Like, how can we know that we've transformed ourselves enough? Like we've mentioned that it's slippery, it's kind of hard, but let's try to break it down for people. How can they get a sense of how they're doing?
So it's really interesting. I'm reflecting on a client that our team just finished working with. And it was very fascinating to work with a cross functional group of people. And people in the dominant community in the organization did not realize that they were causing harm on an almost everyday basis.
Mm,
And we, after doing some deep diving, deep conversations, we created a brave, safe space for people to really talk and dig deep. And what we surfaced was that people um, inside believe, people in the dominant culture believe that they are better than. Now, they don't say this consciously, they don't think this necessarily consciously, but unconsciously, the way some people were being treated, some Black and Brown folks were being treated, was I am better than you.
mm-hmm.
But this is part of the systemic nature of what we're all dealing with. And the Black and Brown folks were so used to feeling oppressed that they just took it as this is the way it is. This is the way it is
Yeah.
because it's been indoctrinated in both communities for such a long time.
I tend to
And
refer to
so,
that as like the negative side of resilience.
yes, exactly. And so literally we had to peel back the onion and really talk about the Black and Brown folks had to surface what does it look like? What does it feel like? So to answer your question, when the people in the organizations or the communities can feel like they're being treated equitably, they're being treated differently, that's when you know it's really working.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter how many diversity ERGs you put together, it doesn't matter how many trainings but the people have to feel like things are changing and have to see it, not just feel it. It's not just a feeling. Am I being paid the same thing that somebody else in another job is being paid and we're doing the same work and I'm a woman versus what a man is being paid?
Right.
Or I'm a Black woman being paid less than my white counterpart. So it's not just a feeling, it is definitely making sure that the systems are equitable.
Yeah, definitely. We've got a couple comments coming in, and
Mhm.
maybe we can address them. So, John Monahan, a good friend of mine, he says, when the dominant culture is unaware that they're defining what diversity is, and then getting uncomfortable when the non-dominant group speaks up.
Oh,
Yes. Okay,
yes.
so that's how we know that it's not working for sure.
Yes.
Quinton mentions what screams this isn't working: culture related turnover and leaders consistently causing harm, right? So many parallels to what you were just talking about.
Mhm.
Outside the organization, John again says, thinking the work is outside the organization by taking a stand or a statement rather than creating space for people's experiences to be heard. Oh, yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Wow, yeah. All both of those are hitting the nail on the head. Hi, Quentin. That's my buddy.
We have another
Yeah.
comment that's come in from an anonymous user. If every workplace's DEI efforts are successful, I'm still not convinced that Jalen Walker would still be alive today, that the white supremacist shooting in Buffalo wouldn't have happened. I'm pessimistic. So, LinkedIn user, yeah, I hear the frustration. Christina, would you like to take this one on?
Yeah, you might be right. You literally might be right. Working with another colleague, we actually worked with a police department in a small town. And I have to tell you, I'm not easily traumatized. I'm not by the work that I do. I really go in with a focus and a determination. But I left there really discouraged. I left there really discouraged based on the comments that the police officers were making. And I just thought, I'm not ready to do that work. I can go in probably almost any other space, but they are so entrenched with this superiority. And I'm not saying this about all police officers. I know, personally know, some really good police officers that I love. And some of them I just know that I'm following on Facebook or LinkedIn or whatever. So I know it's not all police officers, but those police officers that have this feeling of, we're going to go get the bad guys, and the bad guys all happen to be black and brown.
Yeah.
I don't know whether you saw this article, Enrico, but just recently there was an article that some a Boy Scout troop was going through a police um, training facility. And I'm sorry that I can't tell you the article because I don't usually like to quote things unless I can say this is the source. But what they saw were target shooting were black men with guns.
Wow.
This is where they were doing their target shooting. So when you train people like this, and I know we're going a slightly different direction here, but so many people, I've heard so many people say, why doesn't the black man just surrender? The black man that's being chased by the police. And it's because historically, even when black men are being told, do this, and they're doing exactly what they're told, they're still shot and killed.
Yeah. It's a lose lose, and the data bears
Yeah,
that out.
yeah. Right, exactly. So I don't know. It is
Yeah.
discouraging.
Absolutely. I mean, so I think you and I have talked about this. We both see work as a great entry point, but it is not the only entry point,
No.
right? And so people have this idea that change is top down, it's bottom up, but in reality, real change, broad social change, often comes from many directions all at once, right?
Yes.
If we only solve issues kind of procedurally and linearly, sequentially, we will never get to the kind of change that we want to see because it's just too slow, too limited, and it ignores the fact that things are very interrelated and complex.
Yeah, thank you. That's such a great point, Enrico, because whenever our team is working in an organization, we are telling people we're pushing levers from many different places. We're pushing at the top, we're pushing it if there is such a thing as a bottom, we're pushing in the middle, we're pushing so many different levers because we know it takes a lot of different things happening all at the same time to bring about change. And one of the things that um, we're really focusing on is helping to make sure that when folks who are on the front lines begin to speak up and say, hey, you may not have intended that, but the way this impacted me is this way.
Hmm.
Maybe it's a microaggression that um, their supervisor inflicted on them that they were not aware of. But we're really trying to make sure that systemically that boss then doesn't go and write them up or put them in a position that's uncompromising or difficult. So we're working on that level and working on people speaking up because I felt so bad for one white female who I believe she was saying, well, I know what she was saying. She was saying, I think I'm causing harm every day and I may not know it. I need somebody to tell me, hey, when you say this or you do this, this inflicts harm on me.
Yeah.
And some people want to know and will take steps to address their issues. Um, Other people know and just use that as an excuse. I'm just going to be real.
Yeah, no, that is real. And we've got some more comments coming in with the source. So your buddy Quentin with this link to the Guardian. Thank you also
Oh,
to
thank you,
Deborah.
Quentin.
And then
Hmm.
Clarissa Fusilier, a DiVerity PBC network consultant, as an alternate source as well. So thank you all so much for that. Really
Yeah,
appreciate it.
I appreciate that because I knew I had seen it, but I didn't. Sometimes people don't believe you unless you can say the what's the source.
Yeah.
So I I appreciate you all putting those links in the chat.
So if I can kind of collect where we are right now, I feel like to answer our titular question, right? So why diversity trainings fail, right? I think what we're saying in this conversation is it fails because it is only one way of addressing one part of our issues around diversity, right? So training is
Right,
one thing, but changing the hearts and minds, as we're saying, it takes a lot. And a lot of people don't really understand behaviors, as you said earlier. But
right.
one of the most shocking things that I learned as a young teacher was, in fact, nobody has taught most people how to learn. We just throw them into a school or an educational setting and say, go, you'll learn, you'll pick it up. This
Hmm.
is absolutely absurd. Like I didn't really learn how to learn until I was after I became a teacher, excuse me, which is not a great state of affairs. And so I feel like, yeah, for diversity, for us to recreate or to change our hearts and minds such that diversity is a given, not only a given, but an accepted given in everyday life, it's going to take a lot, right? It's going to take more than just telling police not to use
Right,
certain people as target practice, right? I mean,
right.
as ridiculous as
Exactly.
it is, but there's a lot of low-hanging fruit, it's true, but, I
Hmm.
think that's often a distraction, right? So we get so caught up in all the low-hanging fruit because there is so much that we end up kinda missing the mark, and it's hard
Hmm.
when we don't have, perhaps as great communication structures between organizations or between efforts, so I don't know, I know this wasn't exactly where we planned for the conversation to go, but I'm just curious, like, what are your thoughts around that?
I think um, I read a really good book when I was at Hopkins, and it was called Learning in Relationship. And what I loved about that book, it was probably one of the first times that I realized how complicated just regular communication is. And I have a great graphic. I don't have it with me, but there's a great graphic that was done by Veritas Culture organization. And it's a picture of the brain, and over the top it says sifting. And it talks about the fact that we're all exposed to 11 million bits of information in a few seconds, like
Yeah.
11 million bits. And so
Oh,
what
that's
happens
an
is,
actual number that they found? 11
oh
million?
yeah, oh yeah, 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 absolutely.
Wow.
And what happens is we begin to sift out information. Like we can't take it all in. So based on how we were raised, the family culture, what we saw on television, um, how we were treated in school, who we played with in school, our beliefs, all of those things take the data, the information that's coming into us, and it sifts it very quickly. And then we either say or do something based on how we sifted that data.
Right.
So what's so interesting is that I was talking to a client yesterday, and she was saying that when she talks to a person that she supervises, she frequently has to say, "What did you hear me say?"
Yeah.
And she would say probably 65% of the time, what they repeated back to her was not what she said.
Yeah.
So those people are sifting the data based on their own experiences. So you can take one person and they can communicate to three people at the same time with the same facial expression, with the same tone of voice,
Yeah.
giving everyone equal eye contact, and people will perceive something different.
Yeah, I mean, I often say that people answer the questions that they wish that they were asked, right? You ask
Oh, yeah, I
anybody,
like that.
I
Right,
mean, how many
right.
times have you done a survey or a questionnaire and you get all kinds of responses and you're like, I
And
have a degree, like it, I should be getting a narrower band of responses.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. It's fascinating. So, it goes back to the question of why is this so difficult?
Yeah,
Because we're very complex human beings. All of us are very complex and
that's
have
true.
very different lived experiences. But I think part of the other reason why things haven't worked as well is because um, oftentimes, like I see people coming to our organization and saying, we want this done, this done, this done, and this done.
Right.
And it's fascinating to me because oftentimes we'll say, okay, we'll do that. But once we go in and do our own assessment, it's like they're not starting in the right place.
Yeah, it's
So
like
what I
you didn't tell me about you told me A,
right,
B, and
right.
C, but there is a whole alphabet here.
Yes, exactly, exactly, exactly. It's really interesting. But it's okay. We
Yeah.
we we go where we have to go.
I mean,
We go
what
where
this
nowhere we go nowhere man has been before.
yeah, where nobody wants to go often.
Right, exactly.
I remember I was learning quite a bit about behavioral economics at one point, right? Because I was
Mm,
also trying to understand more about human behavior. And one of the fascinating things that I learned was we have this idea, and it's pounded into us, right? Think before you speak, think before you act. This is not how the human brain works.
mhm.
We
Right.
act and then we think, right? Often to
Yes,
justify what the action was. We're very, very emotionally driven
absolutely.
creatures. And some of the comments are kind of in support of this. Let me
Mhm.
just where to start. Oh yeah, so this is back to something we were talking about earlier. John weighing in again, saying intent versus impact, broadly addressed by helping people understand objectivity as a characteristic of white supremacy culture, thinking other people are experiencing, seeing the world the way that you do. Yes, yes.
Yes.
Quentin, I think he's talking here about DEI training. So it's only the very,
Mm,
very start of the process and the work. Like, yeah, absolutely.
yeah,
This is the stuff that you got to do to lay the foundation so that you can begin to do the work in the first place, which is
right.
frustrating, I know, but um Another anonymous LinkedIn user says research suggests that white Americans are turned off by the term white privilege. Do we continue to center their comfort to be successful in advancing DEI? Can we succeed that way? That's a fascinating question.
Yeah, and it's one that I know every DEI practitioner I talk to wrestles with
Yeah,
because of the fact that I don't know. I mean, I wrestle with it all the time. It's not a I want people to get in the room so we can have the conversation. And I have seen and have heard from other practitioners that some white men walked into a workshop and heard that one of the things that was going to be discussed was white privilege, and they got up and walked out.
yeah. I mean, for
It's like,
me,
oh my God, please, you know. And so it's a great question because do we get people in the room and do we talk about the concept without using the words that trigger people?
yeah, yeah,
I mean, that's
yeah.
one of the things, one of the strategies I use. But I have to say this, Enrico, I think what gives me a great excitement is the idea that people are at different ends of the spectrum.
It's true.
And what I mean by that is there are some organizations that have come and said, "Can you come in and talk to our organization about racism? But please don't use the word race." I'm not kidding.
Okay.
And then there are other organizations, and these, in some cases, are predominantly white organizations that are saying things like, "We want to kick down the door of white supremacy, and we want you to help us do it."
Yeah, no, that
So
is
we
a
have people from one side of the fence to the other, and you know,
yeah. Yeah, I mean
it's
to your
interesting.
point, and I recognize that we're a little bit over time here, so I hope I'm not holding you up, but I just want to make sure
No,
that we
good.
can kind of close out in a strong way. Um, we talk a lot about getting people in the room or a seat at the table.
Hmm.
In the room analogy, it's great to get people in the room, but if you're busting down the door, understandably, the people who are inside the room who close the door, they're going
Yeah,
to be scared, right? Because
yeah,
they shut the
yeah.
door for a reason, because they're scared.
Right,
And if
right.
people are barging in, say, "We wanna talk to you," like, "Oh my god," like, I know I don't want to talk to anybody who has just forcibly bashed down my door.
Mm.
Um, but on the other hand, this analogy of getting a seat at the table, okay, understandable framing. Uh, but what's never talked about is who owns the table and what
Mhm.
happens if they decide to take away all the chairs, because that can happen. We're seeing it
Mhm.
start to happen. I don't think it's too
Mhm.
late yet, but there are things afoot, is what I'm saying.
Oh yeah, yeah. It's such an important time in history. And I think the thing that I want people in the dominant culture to recognize, there's great value in having privilege if you know what to do with it.
Yeah,
If you know what to do with it. And I really wish people would stop being so traumatized by the word, get over it. Black and brown people have had to go through so much. You have to, and I'm speaking to white people specifically, you have to strengthen your resolve to be in this fight. This is going to take all of us to do this work, number one. And you cannot cringe at the word privilege. And privilege is based on, who you're proximate with.
yeah.
So I'm able
Relationships.
bodied. I'm able bodied. I'm cisgendered. I mean, those are privileges in relation to other people.
Yep.
And I am thrilled that I have the privilege because I want to use the privileges I have to serve.
Mhm.
And so I really want white people to get over hearing the word white privilege and feeling bad or whatever. We don't have time for that. We have a
Yeah,
massive transformation coming in this country. We
yeah.
need every person who can contribute towards breaking down this, uh, that we can.
Yeah, and to draw another parallel, just to really drill down on this privilege piece, my mother is very short. I'm lucky. I'm pretty tall. My whole life since I was taller than since I grew taller than her, so since I was like 10 years old or something, she has asked me to get things off of high shelves for her, right?
Mhm,
Because
mhm,
I'm tall.
mhm,
The only
mhm.
time where I've really kind of bristled against that was when somebody treated me as a tall person, as a means to their end of getting something down. When they didn't see my humanity, right? When they were
Mm,
just like, "Oh, you just exist for me to get what I want." Yeah, I hated that. But
right,
somebody that I have a relationship with said, "Hey, can you grab this for me? I can't do it myself." I get a
right.
warm, fuzzy
It
feeling about that, you know?
absolutely, 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 absolutely.
Okay,
Yeah,
so just to kind of close out on a couple other comments here, and then we'll go. We got Quentin kind of weighing in again. Another piece that Quentin has noticed is that folks don't feel, all caps, like they have any connection to the information. In my quote trainings and other events, I share my own personal stories to help people put a real life person and a face to the issues. So important. It tends to help a lot in conjunction with the stats that we have to use. People care, excuse me, more intensely when the impact is on a real person they can feel for. Quentin, thank
yeah.
you so much for your contributions and for this one in particular.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we have not answered all the questions here, but hopefully we can still engage with them in the chat, and it's great to see this energy.
Yeah.
So, how can we kind of intentionally close out here and maybe leave people with a little bit of hope?
I think in most organizations, there are people that if an organization wants to go on the journey of taking on this task of trying to make workplaces more humane for everyone, it's important to invite those people to the table. It's really important that they're included in what's about to happen. If someone's just embarking on this journey, I just think it's really important that they're included in the conversation. This is not something that's happening way out in another country. This is happening right here in our workspaces, and invite those voices to the table. So often when we see the faux pas that companies like Starbucks made and H&M and some other companies that made, I'm pretty sure they didn't have a person of color in the mix.
Or
And
at
when you
least not a good
don't,
relationship with a person of
right,
color.
right, exactly, exactly. And while we don't want to use their labor without reward, we certainly need to check in with folks because it has a very different look and feel when it's coming from um, a homogenous group of people.
Yeah,
You really have to include the diversity that you have or seek outside support to pull this stuff together. So
definitely.
I think diversity work can be successful. I wouldn't leave it just on diversity training. That is just a very small part of it. The biggest part is the transformational part. And that's where a lot of leaders don't understand. They want to bring people in and say, okay, go work with these people. They don't realize it's about them doing the work.
Yeah, fantastic point to end on. Thank you so much once again, Kristina Smith. Um, do you have anything that you'd like people to kind of pay attention to or to look forward to as we're closing out here?
I just say we have to be alert. We have to, I'll tell you, I get up every morning and say, who can I serve today? Like, where can I show up and who can I help? And trust me, I get opportunities every day. And I think we all have got to lean into this work, or this country is going to look very different. It's pointing in not a good direction. So I think we need to step it up, do what we can do, and do it now
Yeah,
for our children and our children's children's sake. We got to leave this world a better place than it is right now.
I couldn't agree more. And if you're out there watching or listening and you're kind of wondering, well, where do we begin? I would invite you to think about the relationships that you have, the people that you're closest to, even if they kind of agree with what you're saying. It's a good idea to be explicit about these conversations so that we know where we stand with one another. And once we have those relationships, then we can leverage those to link up with one another and increase our capabilities. All right. Well, that's it for today. Thank you so much for letting us go a little bit over time. And we will see you in a couple of weeks. Next time, we are going live with a woman named Catherine Giscombe. And yeah, we'll be very happy to have that conversation with you all. Thank you so much once again, Kristina.
Enrico, thank you, thank you, thank you.
All right. Thank you so much. All right. Thanks, everybody. That's our show. Bye.